Hello everyone, welcome back to English with Archie. Today we are looking at the 4 conditionals in English. So, first of all, if you don't know what they are, you will know by the end of this video. You will also know how to form them and when we use them. If you do know what they are, then do you know what conditional we use if we want to give someone some advice? Or what conditional do we use if we want to give someone instructions? Well, you'll find that out by the end of the video. So thanks very much for joining me again on English with Archie, or if it's your first time, then hello, I am Archie, nice to meet you. This is where you can come to improve your English and to practice most of all. If you ever want to practice the sentences, the grammar that we practice in these lessons, you can do so in the comments and I will always try and get back to you. So let's get started. So before we start, there's some important things we need to know about all of the clauses. So first of all conditionals are made up of 2 clauses. So clauses are parts of sentences. So they have 2 parts. They have an if clause and a main clause. Or we could say a condition and a result. For example, if it rains, I will take an umbrella. So 2 clauses. If it rains, our if clause, and our main clause. I will take an umbrella. Or our condition, if it rains, and a result. I will take an umbrella. So first we're always saying a condition. So it might rain, it might not rain. But if it does, what will I do? We could also say, for example, if I had a glass of water, I would have a drink. But I don't have a glass of water, so I won't. But if I did, I would have a drink. Oh, I have a glass of water. Okay, I'll have a drink. Okay, so a condition, if something happens, what will I do? This is what I'll do. Now, the second important thing we need to know is that we can write either clause first. So I can say, if it rains, I will take an umbrella, or I will take an umbrella if it rains, and there's no difference. The only difference is that there is a comma in the first one, but that's the only difference. Okay, so let's get started with the 0 conditional. So a 0 conditional sentence tells us general truths or scientific facts. So we form it with if, then the present tense, then the present tense again. So for example, if you press that button, the lights turn on. Oh, yeah. So if you press that button, the lights turn off. And if you press that button, the lights turn on. Right. So this is something that happens every time. Every time we press the button, the lights turn on or they turn off. Okay, so this is a general truth. Now, another example is if you heat water, eventually it evaporates. And this is true. This happens every time. If we heat water, it evaporates. Now, we can also obviously reverse these sentences and say the other way. So, the lights turn on if you press the button, or water eventually evaporates if you heat it. And the meaning's the same. We can do either way. And just to point out that you in this sentence, or in these sentences, is a general you. It doesn't mean you specifically, but it means you, it could be anyone. If you press the button, the lights turn on. It means any person. If any person presses that button, the lights turn on. So, we can also exchange if for when. We can say when, or we can say if. And sometimes it makes a difference, and sometimes it doesn't make much difference. So, for example, when I drink too much coffee, I don't feel well. So we could say if in this sentence, and the meaning is really the same. Generally, if we say if, it means this situation might happen and this situation might not happen. If we say when, then we expect the situation to happen. So this sentence, when you see your wife, say hello from me. This sentence, we should say when, because I'm saying to my friend, well, when you see your wife, say hello from me to your wife. And my friend is leaving. My friend is going to his house where his wife lives. So I expect that he will see his wife. So I can say when. If I say if, it suggests that I don't think he will see his wife, which maybe would be strange. We could say if in a different context, though. So if I have my friend Sarah, and my friend Sarah goes to Paris, and in Paris I have another friend, Abby, okay? She lives in Paris. Now Sarah and Abby are also friends. Now they might meet each other in Paris, I don't know. They haven't organised anything yet. I don't know if Abby's available, but I can say to Sarah, well, if you see Abby, say hello from me. So that's basically it. Now in that last sentence, we've got an imperative. When you see your wife, say hello from me. It's not you say hello, it's say hello. So it's a instruction. So we quite often use the zero conditional to give an instruction. And we use the imperative in that main clause. So, for example, if it gets too hot, turn this dial. Or, if it doesn't rain this week, water my plants, please. So here we're using an imperative in that second main clause, just to give an instruction to someone. If this happens, do this. Now, here are 3 beginnings of sentences, 3 conditions, and I want you to try and finish one of these sentences, or all 3 if you want, and write in the comments below. So, moving on to the first conditional. So, first conditional. We use it to say what will probably happen. So, we form it with if plus the present tense plus the future tense. So, our first example is if it's too windy, the parasol will fall over. Now, parasol is the word for this big umbrella that we put in a table outside. We put in the center of the table to protect us from the sun on a really sunny day. So that's a parasol. So if it's too windy, what will happen? The parasol will fall over. So we use a first conditional in this sentence because we're talking about a specific situation. We're not just saying generally. I mean, we could say in the zero conditional, if it's windy, parasols fall over, but it doesn't happen every time. Sometimes it doesn't. And here, we're talking about a specific situation. So I'm saying to my friend, or I'm saying to my mum, or my brother, or whatever, if it's windy, though, the parasol will fall over. So let's take the parasol down. So it's a specific situation talking about that one time, not all the time. Second example, if I spend too much, I will regret it. Again, we can switch any of these, so I will regret it if I spend too much. Now again, we're using the first conditional here because it's a specific situation. We're talking about this one time. So I am going to the casino tonight, and if I spend too much at the casino, well, I will regret it. If we used a zero conditional sentence, we would say all the time. If I spend too much, I regret it. that's talking about all our life. If we spend too much money, we always regret it. But here we're talking about a specific situation. Or if I'm going to dinner tonight with my friends at a restaurant, and if I spend too much, I will regret it. Another one, if he doesn't help me with my homework, I won't help him with his dance practice. So again, a specific situation. I want my friend or my brother or my friend or my brother or my dad to help me with my homework. And if he doesn't, well, I will not help him with dancing. So again, a specific situation, not something that happens all the time. We can also exchange will for going to, because going to is about the future as well. Or for a modal verb. So a modal verb, it could be could, might, should, because we can use these for the future to tell different sorts of feelings about things in the future. So if the weather doesn't change, you should take your coat. Or if you go to the cinema, I'm going to come too. We could say I will come too as well. Or if she doesn't respond to your calls, you could go to our house. So we're using could to express it's an option. So we can use different modal verbs instead of will, or we can use going to, just to change the meaning slightly. Now, can you complete one of these sentences with a first conditional and write it down in the comments below? Okay, so let's look at the second conditional. So, second conditional, it talks about things that are unlikely to happen, things that probably will not happen. And it's often used to talk about our dreams or our fantasies. So we form it with if, the past simple, would, and the base form of the verb. And the base form, if we have the verb to go, then we have go, went, gone. Go is our base form. Or to eat, ate, eaten. Eat is our base form. So when we know the verb as to go, to be, to have, to do, that is the base form. But we don't use the to in this part. Okay? So, for example, if I were rich, I would buy a big house. Now, the other thing is that in the second conditional, we use were for all the pronouns instead of was for I and she and he. Now, we can use was as well. So we can say, if I was rich, I would buy a big house. Sometimes you will hear it, but it's not as correct. It's more correct to say were. But sometimes you will hear people say was. Okay? But usually we should say were. So if I were rich, I would buy a big house. Or if I didn't ever have to work again, I think I would get really bored. So again, what's the condition? Well, if I didn't ever have to work again, but it's not very likely. I mean, I'm in my 20s, I would probably have to work for a while yet. But if I didn't, I think I would get really bored anyway. So, and then our last one, what would you do if you fell in love with your best friend's wife? So here we have a question, and for the question we often swap it around. What would you do if you fell in love with your best friend's wife? Well, I would. Okay, so again, we've got our would, a do. Would you do for our would and base form, and then if you fell in love, if you fell in love, that's our past simple form, fell. Okay, so we often use the second conditional to give advice, because we often say, if I were you, I would speak to your boss about it. Yeah, I see you have a big problem that's a difficult situation. Well, if I were you, I would speak to your boss about it. Now, we say that because in the second conditional, because we're talking about unlikely things. Well, I can't be you, I'm me. Okay, I'm not you, so I can't be you. But if I were, what would I do? Well, I would speak to your boss. Okay? Or we could say, we can ask the question, we can ask for advice and say, well, what would you do if you were me? Or if you were in my shoes? So, in my shoes to mean if you were me. So, that's another aspect of the second conditional which is really useful. Now, can you complete one of these sentences with a second conditional and write it down in the comments below? Let's move to the third conditional. So, third conditional. This is our last one already. We've made it already. So, third conditional. The third conditional sentence tells us what would have happened if the past were different. So we form it with if plus the past perfect and would have in the past participle. So, if I had known he was at the party, I would have said hello. So we're looking back in the past and we're saying, okay, I was at the party. I didn't know he was at the party. And now it's the next day. Well, if I had known, well, I would have said hello, but I didn't know. So we're looking at the past and saying, if the past were different, what would I do? What would I have done? If she had tried harder, she might have passed the exam. So this person is saying she didn't pass the exam. She didn't try hard enough. But looking back in the past, well, if she had tried harder, she might have passed the exam, but she didn't. Or if we had followed the GPS, the sat-nav, the machine that we use in the car machine, or we just use Google Maps on our phone to get to a destination, the GPS. If we had followed the GPS, we would already be there. But we didn't follow the GPS, so now we're waiting in traffic. So we're going to be very late. So if we had in the past followed the GPS, we would be there. Okay, and one more. If we hadn't trained, we wouldn't have won the match. So if we hadn't done that, we wouldn't have won it. We did train and we won it, which is good. But if we hadn't, we wouldn't have. So that's the third conditional. So here are some sentences. So try to finish one of these sentences and write it down in the comments below for me. So now we're going to look at the four conditionals with the same sentence or a similar sentence so we can compare the structure and also the meaning of each of these sentences. So zero conditional. Remember, we form it with when or if plus the present tense plus the present tense. So when she works, she gets. So when she works hard, she gets good grades at school. So here we're talking about generally, something that is generally true, that over the years I have seen that when she works hard, when she tries, she gets good grades. And this is something that's just generally true. Now, if we look at a first conditional, so if plus present tense plus future tense. If she works hard, she will get good grades at school. So here, we're talking about a more specific situation. So she has maybe just started school, or she has 3 or 4 years left, so she has enough time to have a big effect on her grades. And if she works hard in these next few years, then at the end of that, she will get good grades. That will be the result of her hard work. So we're talking about that as a specific situation, as opposed, instead of just a general truth about when she works hard. We could also say if she works hard, she will get a good mark or a good grade in the exam. So before an exam, we're talking about a very specific situation, a very specific exam, not just a generally, but then we can also say a sentence like this. So second conditional. So here we've got our if plus our past simple plus our would and our base form of the verb. So if she worked, she would get. If she worked hard, she would get good grades at school. Now we use the second conditional about something that's unlikely to happen. So it suggests that, well, now she's not working hard. But it's unlikely, but if she did, she would get good grades. So I don't think she's going to work hard, probably. But I'm telling you that if she did, then she's very intelligent and she could get very good grades. And our last one, our third conditional, we have if plus our past perfect plus would have and our past participle. So if she had worked, she would have gotten. So this one, we're talking about in the past. So if she had worked hard, she would have gotten good grades at school. She didn't work hard. She didn't get good grades at school. She couldn't go to university. But when we think about it and we look back at the years, we can say, well, if she had worked hard, she would have gotten good grades and she would have gone to university. But unfortunately, she didn't. She didn't work hard. So that third one is really focused on what was it like in the past? What happened in the past? And if the past were different, what would have happened? So let's look at this one more time with one other sentence. So, zero conditional. If I drink coffee, I feel more awake. Okay? Generally, this is true. Every time I drink coffee, I feel more awake. It happens every time, or almost every time. We could say if or when. Again, present tense, present tense. First conditional. If I drink more coffee, I will feel more awake. So again, present tense, then future tense. So if I drink, I will feel. So here we're talking about a specific situation, like I'm trying to complete a project. I'm trying to write an essay, and I'm getting really tired. I feel exhausted. But you know what? If I drink coffee, I will feel more awake. Okay, I will have some coffee. So I'm not just talking about a general situation, but a specific one. Second conditional. Something that's unlikely. So past simple, then would and the base form of the verb. If I drank, I would be. If I drank coffee, I would be a more productive person. Now here, I've changed the sentence a bit to make a little more sense with the second conditional. So if I drank coffee suggests that it's unlikely. So maybe I'm allergic to coffee, or maybe I just think coffee is disgusting. So I'm not going to drink coffee. But if I did drink coffee, if I drank coffee, I would be a more productive person because I would feel really awake all the time. So that's the second conditional, unlikely situation. And third conditional, talking about the past, so past perfect, then wouldn't have past participle. If I had drunk, I wouldn't have fallen asleep. So if I had drunk some coffee, maybe I wouldn't have fallen asleep in the exam. So I had the exam finished, in the exam, during the exam, I fell asleep. But thinking about it now, well, if I had had some coffee before the exam, well, maybe I wouldn't have fallen asleep in the exam, which was kind of embarrassing. Okay, so that is the 4 conditionals. Now, I have one more thing for you. Okay, so I have another little test for you. So I know I've asked you to write a lot of sentences already, so you don't need to do this. If you want to do more, though, here they are. I've written some contexts for the 0, first, second, and third conditional, and you can think of the sentence or a sentence which works or matches that context. So, for example, 0 conditional number 1. What happens when you crack an egg in a hot pan? When you crack an egg in a hot pan, it... So, pause the video if you want to keep looking at these. That's the end of the video today, so thanks very much. Okay, so that's it, everyone. So, if you would like to practice, do so in the comments. Also, I would really like to know what part of the video was the most useful, what you found the most clear. That would be really useful for me, and you could just let me know in the comments. And I've started a new Instagram, English with Archie, so if you want to have words of the day and grammar tips, then you can find me on Instagram, English with Archie, and that's it. That's my video. So if you haven't subscribed, then subscribe, and I will see you next time. So bye.